Albert Awol, the voice of the jungle, broadcasting on the DVC to all points unknown. If you're within the sound of my voice, you're listening to Welcome Home Podcast on the DVC.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Waitlist. This is Welcome Home's version of a topic-based show. We typically do a lot of news and DVC topics, but this is our show where we cover just one topic and we cover it in depth and go over a lot of different things around it. So I got Trevor here today, and we also have a special guest, Brian from DCLDuo Podcast. He's here to help us not only from the DVC side, but also from the DCL side. So Brian, thanks for joining the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be on. Great to finally talk to you guys.
Yeah, and Brian, you've listened to our show for a while. I think you said, right? You've listened to us, and I know you've got your show, and you guys just started up pretty recently.
Yeah, unfortunately, we started a podcast right when cruising pretty much stopped, and we started a cruising-focused podcast when cruising stopped. But yeah, I've been listening to you guys since before we bought into DVC a little over a year ago. I was looking around for podcasts to educate ourselves about DVC and found your guys' podcast, and so started listening, and it was a big help in making our decision to buy DVC. So yeah.
I'm sorry that you came to us to educate you. That's
well, you and your friend Chad Pennycuff. So the two of you guys are covering the field here on this stuff. So I love to listen to the shows.
We try to. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your podcast and about your background with Disney and anything you want to tell us about your membership, your DVC membership, or
yeah, sure.
Just about your DCL, your different cruises that you do, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, my wife and I started a podcast called the DCLDuo. We're big Disney Cruise Line fans. We started cruising with Disney probably 2 years ago now, and have done 6 cruises in a little over, actually it's almost 3 years ago now, done 6 cruises in that period of time. We've got 4 ocean cruises planned next year, 1 river cruise with Adventures by Disney. So we love all things Disney, love the parks, big Disneyland fans and Walt Disney World fans, and have annual passes at both. And so it was kind of natural for us to buy into DVC. We have home resorts at the villas at Grand Californian and at Riviera. So that's kind of our DVC experience. Have not had a ton of DVC stays as of yet because we just bought in about a year ago, and things have obviously been a little bit weird here recently. But yeah, given our love of Disney, we listened to a lot of Disney podcasts and decided to start kind of a cruise line focused podcast after listening to some of the others out there. And so yeah, we've been trying to start that up and had some guests on during the quarantine period that have been really kind of fun because folks are stuck at home and want to talk Disney. We've had some authors and some bloggers and vloggers and other folks on to talk about their experience. So yeah, it's been fun. It's been a fun journey.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for coming on with us today. We appreciate it. Because you have a very unique perspective on this particular question that we got from one of our listeners who was begging us to talk about this. Begging us, right? So in the group. And this was from listener Jay. And so I'll just read a bunch of stuff, basically everything they wrote out here, and we can then just start talking about it. So the question is, could DVC build a new cruise ship, create an inventory of points, and sell those like any other DVC resort? Based on my rudimentary Wikipedia research, it looks like the Disney Dream has 1,250 rooms at a cost of $900 million to build. I'm not sure how many nights per year the boat could be at sea, but I estimated they could book reservations for 80% of the year, giving them a total of 365,000 room nights per year. There's some math going on here. I appreciate the math, Jay. And Brian did even more math that we're going to get into. Jay put a simple average of 30 points per night for a room. Around what a Villas at Grand Floridian Studio is during Dream season, for a total point inventory of 10,950,000. If they sold those points at 180 per point, they could sell those points for, oh my gosh, what is that, 1.971 billion?
Yeah, just shy of 2 billion.
Just shy of 2 billion.
Yeah.
Or about $1 billion more than what it costs to build the ship. Now, listen, these are all numbers that, is written on a napkin, right? So we don't know if these numbers are true. Jay did the math on this. So for an owner who wanted to take a 5-night cruise per year, they would have to buy around 150 points, 27,000 at 180 per point. And let's say dues are higher than any other at $15 per point, although this might be unrealistically low, Jay says. The question for you guys is if you had a chance to have a home resort priority to book a 5-night cruise every year on a DVC dedicated cruise line for $27,000 upfront and then $22.50 a year in dues, would you buy that membership? Also assume these members have full DVC Blue Card privileges and can book any other resort the same as the rest of us with non-home resort priority. I'm thinking $180 per point might even be low. You guys tell me what I'm missing or that I'm crazy. I'm not saying that, by the way, Jay is. Otherwise, use your connections to get the idea in the right hands. Unfortunately for you, Jay, we don't really have any connections. But, if we ever get to talk to somebody that has some connections, we can make this happen. So anyway, I'm interested in this idea. And let's for a second forget about any of the legalities around this. The timeshare industry is very, very, very regulated, right? So let's forget about that, whether this is even a legal thing or not, because we're just dreaming here, right? So what do you guys think of this?
Well, I was actually going to say just going to say really fast on the legality side, there's already a model for this, not in a timeshare aspect, so that might be a little bit different. But there is a cruise ship, I think it's called The World, and people buy rooms on it, and it just sails the world continuously, and you own a room on the ship. So there may be a model for this out there. I will just start by saying that ship is insanely expensive to buy a cabin on. The cabin, I believe, a baseline cabin, I believe, costs about something like over $1 million. So, just to put it out there, the legalities probably could work out in Disney's favor if they wanted them to.
Yeah, and I guess my initial thought on that is that, the $180 a point is, I think that's incredibly low, especially for something like a cruise ship. I can't imagine, looking at Riviera right now. I mean, that's a fairly new resort, and it's selling close to 200, and other resorts are selling above 200 right now. So, I mean, when you think about that, adding even just an extra $20 per point, that scales up quite a lot in terms of the overall price. So, I mean, that would be amazing if they could do $180 a point. But it's sorry, Jay, I think you're crazy on that one.
Well, and the other problem you have too, right, is that cruises are all inclusive, right? And so, and DVC's not all inclusive. You're just paying for your room. So, you're talking on a cruise, the food is included and all the entertainment and all the things that come with the cruise are included there. So that's why there's such a premium when you pay for a cruise with points, is because it costs a lot more, right? So,
well, yeah, you've got your food, your entertainment, your ports of call, right? So the DVC, you're talking about just covering your hotel room. Then you can add on your dining plan. You can get an annual pass to the park. So there's the added costs are all built in. I don't know. So I want to start by saying I was a big proponent of this idea. I've always thought it'd be a really fun and interesting thing. This question forced me to think about it in a much more sort of analytical way, I think. And I appreciate that Jay provided some numbers. I agree with your statement up front, Tom, that the math here is it's voodoo science at this point. Like, we don't have a crystal ball into Disney's sort of profit and loss statement specific to a particular ship and cost. So, I pulled some numbers and things to try and analyze this problem a little bit, but they're kind of coming from all over the place, and they're a little bit of a guesstimate. But I kind of would break the problem down into, excuse me. I would kind of break the problem down into what is the benefit to the buyer, what is the benefit to Disney, and then, do those two things, are they both beneficial? If they're not both beneficial, then it's not going to happen. And so I don't know how much you want to get into the numbers here, but I would say that at a rudimentary level, I think there could be a benefit to Disney, and there could be a small benefit to the buyer, but I'm not sure it's enough to really entice a buyer, and I'm not sure that it's really enough to entice Disney. And at the end of the day, they've probably run these numbers with their own, they could run these numbers and probably come up with something that's, what I would say, much more accurate than what I've done, and they may have, right?
So I guess the question is though too. So let's just use Jay's pretend numbers. And Brian, did you come up with a different cost that you would think it would have to be? I'm just looking down through here. You think it would have to be a lot higher, right?
Well, so yeah, I mean, so the numbers that I think Jay got dead on. So yes, the Fantasy has 1,250 staterooms. When she was built in 2012, it cost $950 million to build her. So, moving that forward to today's real cost, it'd be about $1.1 billion to build a ship like the Fantasy. I think the place where Jay's math starts to break down a little bit is the maintenance costs. So actually two places. One is probably the cost to buy in. I think you're right. I think 180 something a point is going to be way too low to buy into a cruise ship, considering everything that they're going to have to pay for. And so, but I think the other big place is the maintenance cost. So I think Jay estimated about $15. Is that, am I getting that? My memory right?
Yeah, it was 15. Yeah, it's $15.
Yeah. So what I thought of to start with was just to sort of say like, okay, well, what is the cost of operating a luxury hotel, right? And I couldn't really find a good number, but the best estimate I saw out there was about $24 million a year to operate kind of a luxury hotel. The cost to operate a cruise ship on an annual basis is something north of, I think it was like $370 million a year, just to maintain and operate the cruise ship. And that's, you got to think about that through the lens of a hotel on Disney property can have some shared service access, right? They'll have maintenance staff that are, maintaining the hotel, maintaining the parks, right? They have cast members they can rotate in and out of hotels if they need to. So there's some shared service access that they have that a cruise ship is basically taking that hotel and moving it from place to place to place. And every time it docks, it costs money, right? And then the other thing is just fuel consumption on these things. Cruise ships are sort of, raked over the coals for not being very environmentally friendly. And there's a reason for that. They consume a lot of fuel and produce a lot of waste, and it costs money to deal with all of that stuff, right? So I think that the maintenance fees that I sort of figured out based on kind of my own math was something around $27 or $28 a point. And I have a feeling that's actually low. For Disney. And it doesn't really factor in, I don't think. Cruise ships will go through a dry dock process once every 5 years, 5 or 6 years. I think the modern ships are meant to accommodate. So they'll be taken offline for 2 weeks and refurbed and rehabbed and, maintained. And so, when they rebuild pieces of the ship, that costs even sort of more money. So I have a feeling the maintenance costs here would be really, really high. And what I get concerned about is when you start to take, okay, so an inside stateroom might cost you 115 points for a 7-night cruise or a 5-night cruise, whatever it is. You multiply that across a big maintenance cost, and basically your maintenance fee for the year might start to come out to the same price as just buying a room on the ship for a 7-night cruise. And so now, if that's the case, well, then I've got to go on more than one cruise a year, which means I have to buy more points, which means my maintenance costs are constant. It just becomes this sort of game where the whole thing collapses because you're not really saving any money from just buying the cruise ship or buying the room on the cruise ship for a particular cruise. What you end up doing is you're paying the, whatever it is, $27,000 for the 100 and some odd points, to have booking priority, which you can get through the Castaway Club in Disney Cruise Line just by taking cruises. So, that's kind of the problem I see with it primarily is the maintenance cost, I think.
But so what if it was a different ship though? So what if it was a new ship that was just for this specific DVC DCL, right? So I know that doesn't impact the numbers per se, but does it allow the cost to be at the same level, right? So I guess what you're saying is you're going to have a ship that's booked all the time. And even though it's going to be the same cost for the user, it's going to be the amenity of having a special ship.
Yeah, I think it would come down to, so what percentage of these costs fall into what bucket? So like, in a hotel, a huge percentage of the cost, right, is just the labor. Yep. Now on the cruise line, I'm guessing their margins on labor are a little bit different because they're using contract labor outside the U.S. They don't have to pay, the same minimum wage requirements and benefits and all of that sort of stuff. So, but they've got more labor, right? They're carrying around their engineering staff with them. They got to have someone pilot the ship. There's just a whole bunch of staff that a hotel wouldn't necessarily carry with them.
Yeah, so I'm not necessarily speaking about in comparison to a hotel. I'm just speaking in comparison to the other cruise ships per se.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Well, and that's where we're sort of headed with like, so one, you're going to have the same amount of labor on board.
Yep.
I don't see a way around having the same amount of labor. You're going to consume the same amount of fuel.
I mean, DVC
right?
people are nicer people, though. So can you get rid of some of the labor because they're not going to be as uptight about certain things?
Well, I don't know, David. Have you been in some of those Facebook groups?
But I'll be honest with you. I mean, could you save on labor costs, in terms of, right? Because these are going to be DVC members in terms of kind of upfront contracts and what expectations are, right? There's a little bit, not to say that you want to give a lesser experience per se, but I think that you could cut some of the things in terms of labor to kind of help because it is DVC. I don't know if I'm kind of, getting my way around that.
No, yeah. And it makes sense. I think what I'm looking at is the order of magnitude of the problem.
Yeah.
Right. So to maintain a low maintenance cost at a hotel of $15 a point, which is high, right? You're talking about a $24 million operating budget on an annual basis. For a cruise ship, you're talking about 360. So like if you cut a few staff here and there, a few amenities here and there, like how much do you cut where it stays attractive and is that Disney Cruise Line experience for a DVC member as opposed to, something that's compromised, and have you cut enough to bring the budget down to a much lower maintenance cost, right?
So how about something crazy as no buffets?
Well, I think that would be a good idea regardless right now.
But I mean, there's got to be a fair amount of cost in that.
Yeah. Right. Well, and if I think about what Disney, I mean, the other thing you have to think about from the Disney perspective is like, if this ship doesn't sell out to DVC members, I got to market it to just a regular cruising crowd. Right. And so what's my marketing scheme to get someone on board a cruise ship that's not sailing full?
But do I have to though? Right. Because so think about it like this. If I have everyone's money, why do I care how many people are on the cruise ship if I already have your money? Because that's the thing. On a cruise ship, like you said, there is no, cost of, Disney not making any more money because it's all inclusive. So as a, do I care? Do I care how many people are on the ship if everyone's paid for the ship?
I think you do, because that's the other place where I'm a little skeptical of the math.
Okay.
To be perfectly honest. So if the ship costs $1.1 billion to build, and you sell out. So I calculate a slightly different number of points. I think it's about 13,500 points that they could sell, because the ship can actually sail about 362 nights on average a year. And so if you do that math, Disney nets out close to $2 billion just selling the points, right? But the cruise ship's probably going to have a 20-year lifespan for Disney. And, running some math, this is where things start to get really kind of wonky, because we don't know exactly what Disney's margins are on some of these cruises, but they can make about $200,000 per day at sea. I actually suspect that number is low. That's based on a Carnival ship. And Disney is considered to be, I think, a class above Carnival, and they charge a premium above Carnival. So I'm trying to do some kind of cost comparison here, but let's call it $200,000 to $250,000 per day at sea. And if you multiply that out across across a year, that's $72.5 million per year. That's, potentially, the $2 billion over 20 years, right? By selling the rooms on the ship. And so I have a feeling the math here comes out close enough that what Disney would want to do is be able to sell those rooms to make more money off the ship, right? So that's sort of, I think where the cost comparisons break down are the maintenance costs and whether Disney actually comes out ahead selling everything up front or not.
Yeah, and that's tough, because I think that for me, I would pay double the maintenance cost and I'd pay double the point cost. But I'd want something that was, a riverboat, themed for the new Splash Mountain as an exclusive boat. Right. And at that point, you're getting into the whole Star Wars hotel thing. Like, so, all right, that's what I want. And I'm going to pay double for it. And then does the math, right? And now all of a sudden, and again, I'm going to knock out buffets, right? So it's going to be, less people involved. I mean, maybe the food costs go up a little bit at that point, but I feel like that helps the numbers kind of push in that direction. And, there is no selling to anyone else. I mean, that's what I would make it for me. Because then again, I don't necessarily care if I already have your money. I mean, people are going to go, and maybe you allow them to to do kind of like a, DVC, DCL rental store, right? Something along those lines. But I don't know if I'd cash sell a boat like this. Does it help the numbers if I don't cash sell a boat?
It might, except that then what do you do with members who want to take their points and use them someplace else?
No.
Right, because in the current system, DVC would then sell that room as a cash stay. I don't see the cruise line saying, well, because there are times of year when these cruise ships are already kind of not necessarily at capacity, right? And so if you now limit that down to, well, only DVC members sailing, and I just, are they really going to want to sail a ship a third full? And how would the membership feel about that if they're supporting maintenance costs?
Well, I think maybe that what you do is you do a little bit of a different setup like a lot of the other timeshares do, where you're going to end up buying your week rather than buying your points. I mean, that may be something that would alleviate that. And then maybe in terms of pricing, then pricing changes across the board. I know that's a big change from what DVC is, but I mean, it would be a way around that that kind of that issue in general.
What if you make the boat smaller? What if you have the size of the boat and have it be like a more personal experience, be a much smaller, more intimate experience than like a gigantic, cruise ship?
Well, I have a feeling the cost structure scales.
Yeah. Right. So even if you make it smaller, it's still going to be financially iffy.
Well, I think you have to start charging more, right? Like, for that smaller, intimate experience, like that might actually be a path, if that makes sense, because the cost structure starts to scale the same, I suspect, but you might be able to charge a premium for the rooms, right, on board, because you're giving a more intimate yacht-like kind of VIP treatment
like
experience.
the Star Wars hotel would be.
Yeah. But, then the other problem I think you face, which I sort of was trying to wrestle with a little bit too, is just from an experience standpoint, where's this ship sailing? Is it just constantly sailing?
Yes.
Port Canaveral to the Caribbean, to Castaway Key, or maybe Lighthouse Point? And is that enough of a draw, or do people really want to sail other places? Right.
I guess it's going to depend on what the experience is, and then is there, a replayability of that experience, and what is that time frame? Like, I almost could see this as something that's not an every year thing, but an every 3 year things. And if you kind of made the point set up, that way, you could actually save a lot on cost, because you could make the show, a once every 3 year sort of change per se, especially, when you start that first year. I don't know. I could see it as a riverboat too. I would do a riverboat. I don't necessarily think it's got to be in the ocean for me.
Well, I mean, Disney is they've moved into river cruising, just not Disney Cruise Line. So I mean, that is an interesting idea, because the river cruising over in Europe, you can, as long as you build the right size of ship, right, they can fit on the different rivers comfortably. You could move itineraries around. You could have your Christmas markets cruise in the Christmas time, and sail a different river down the Seine or something, in the summer, right?
I just don't think this could, like you said, I don't know if the numbers work if you take the current look of what DCL is and then try to put, kind of shoehorn DVC into it per se, unless you're charging so much for it. But then what's the benefit?
Well, let me ask you this. Okay, so I'll ask this to the group. What is the price at which you would do this? Like, so what would be the annual dues that you'd be willing to
annual
pay,
dues or
and
buy-in?
the upfront? What's that? Both. I'm saying was the initial cost and what the annual dues would be for it to be worth it to you to cruise for 5 nights.
Every time that I cruise, and I mean, I'm sure Brian could answer this as well, but every time I cruise, it's at least 10 grand. I mean, so if I want to cruise every year, it's 10 grand every year just to cruise.
Yeah, that's about
so
right.
As long as it's just a little bit less than that, I'm in. 7 grand a year, I'm in. Why not?
So I mean, that's considerably more than what we've calculated out.
Well,
here,
that's
right?
that's what I'm saying. Is that if I could save $3,000, why would I not? And see, I think that's, again, when you start thinking of Disney Cruise Line, there's a reason why a lot of people don't go. I mean, I'm sure Brian has been too, but I've been on a few different cruise lines. Disney's the best. It's not a discussion, right? It is for, at least for me, right? For what I've cruised. But that premium is 3 times as much as a Carnival. I don't even think it's double. I think it's close to 3 times at this point of a Carnival. And I mean, I'm okay with that. So would I be okay with 7,000? If you told me right now I could sign up for a 7-day, let's give me a 7-day cruise for 7 grand, I'm in.
I think that also does go back to, so initially, like Brian was saying, that, this would be offered as part of DVC as a whole, where you could move between, staying at DVC resorts and doing Disney Cruise Line.
That's tough.
I think you would have to separate it if you were going to do that, because, someone's not going to pay for, maintenance fees that are, way higher than what we're paying right now in DVC. And, with the offer of, you can stay at DVC, to them, it would be like, well, that's not a benefit, right? It would have to kind of stay exclusive to Disney Cruise Line at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the other draw for cruising is the ability to kind of choose your own adventure a little bit. I mean, so yeah, I agree with you, Damon, that I 10 grand is kind of the moving average, but some cruises are more, some cruises are less. It really depends on where we're going, when we're going, what's the experience we want to have. Are we getting a very maritime cruise? Are we getting a Marvel day at sea? Are we headed over to Europe? Right. So it's not super attractive to me to just have a ship that's sailing in the Caribbean that I have priority on, because I kind of already get that by being a Castaway Club member, right? And I don't have to pay the $27,000 up front, which is just an inside room buy-in, right? Yeah. If I want my standard Ocean View room buy-in, I have a feeling that's going to be closer to $45,000-$50,000 upfront cost.
But it does make sense. But you're right, that is a hard cost. But it would make sense if you're cruising a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're cruising 4 times next year on Disney,
yeah.
supposedly. So we're cruising a ton, but I'm not sure I would buy enough points on one ship to do that, right? Because our cruises next year we've got, I think, 2 Caribbean cruises, but one of them's out of New Orleans. So, we wouldn't even be going out of Port Canaveral. One of them's in Europe, right? So it's sort of, for me, cruising is about as much as the destination as it is the ship. And so just to be able to get on a ship for the next 20 years that's sailing the Caribbean isn't super appealing. It could be appealing for others, but it's not appealing for me.
And it's interesting because I don't necessarily care about the destination of a cruise ship. I'm about the cruise itself.
You're about the eating and the relaxing and there's no gambling.
No, unfortunately. If Disney did that, it would be a whole different ballgame. But no, I don't really actually
Well, there's
care.
a way to drive the maintenance costs down. We'll put a casino on the ship,
course.
and then they can rake in the money.
I mean, I don't actually even get off the boat that often, to be honest with you. I feel too rushed by the port timing to want to do anything at port. Like, that's me.
I'm kind of with you on that, because when I've cruised before, like, the sea days were actually kind of my favorite. There's something really kind of weird and relaxing about looking around you and being completely surrounded by water.
Yeah, it's just, there's so many things
cool.
I wish, I was like, oh, that would be nice to do that. And then I was like, oh, I have to get my own transportation, or, oh, I got to be under this time limit, or, oh, I got to be back by then. And I'm just like, nah, I'm good.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I realized, Damon, that you're me when I stay at the Polynesian when you're on a cruise boat.
Yeah. That's why if there was like a river cruise boat, like, I'd be all in. That I'd be all in on.
Well, and so I'll say I'm the same way on the days at sea. I am super relaxed while my wife is running all over the ship doing everything that she possibly can. And I'm just sitting up by, the pool half the time or watching a movie on funnel vision. But I do use the cruises to go to places that I might not otherwise. Like our cruise out of New Orleans next year, if it happens, we're super excited because we're stopping in Key West. And I just can't imagine a time personally when I would go there not on a cruise ship, where I would just take the time to actually get all the way to Key West, right? So, and we're going to Europe in part because we're going to stop in some ports that we can sort of sample the cities. And I've been to a few already, on land-based vacation, but we're kind of sampling the cities, and probably some of them are places we would just never get to. So, for us, I think we use the ports just to kind of sample a city and get off, and then we're back on the ship where we want to be. So, yeah.
I get what David's saying though too, because there's like that real time restraint that's there, right? And it's like, can you really enjoy it if you're like, they're like, be back in 5 hours or we're leaving without you, like that is a kind of restriction when you're trying to explore. But I get your point too, Brian, where you just kind of, it's a place you would have never gone otherwise, right? So let's pretend for a minute Disney's going to do this, right? Let's pretend like this makes financial sense, right? So I've got a couple questions for the group here. So first of all, what would you want the boat to be themed like? Do you want it to be different than the Disney Cruise Line that you see now? Like different than that color scheme they do now? Have its own kind of thing that's totally separate? Or do you want it to be super Disney-fied like, the Disney boats are now? I'll start with that question.
I think I already kind of led myself down there. I'd make it a river cruise. I'd make it fully exclusive, right? It would be a different theme. It'd be Splash Mountain themed, right? The new Splash Mountain, right? That sort of theme. It might even link up with a Riviera sort of stay, but it would be that Louisiana riverboat, fully themed in that regard. That's what I would say. And it would have to be different. It could be a little bit smaller because, I'm not worried about the waves and, getting sick and all that on the river. So I would say that it could be a little bit of a smaller boat.
All right. I personally, I would be okay with, doing. I'm okay either way, actually. So I would be okay if they just made it a Disney boat, but I think it would be kind of cool if they did something specific and different for Disney, for DVC, but more in the vein of like. And I'm not going to say that I want it to look like Wilderness Lodge. That's not what I'm saying. I more mean in the highly themed area of like a Wilderness Lodge, whereas Riviera is like, and not to trash your home resort, Brian. I'm not going to trash it because I haven't been there yet, right? But it's a little more modern, and a lot of the upgrades they're doing a little more modern, a little less like super Disney themed. So I think if we're going to go like a resort theme kind of look to it, I want it like over the top theme, like Animal Kingdom is, like Wilderness Lodges. That's kind of what I would want it to be.
So I'm going to take a slightly different view. I would want the ship to conform to kind of the ships that Disney already has out there. I think that they're super unique. Every time you see one, you can recognize it immediately. That is a Disney Cruise Line ship with that sort of classic kind of yacht theming. I think, based on this discussion, the direction I would love to see them head is maybe a smaller version that is more intimate and more yacht-like. I think there is something to selling to DVC members some sort of exclusive experience that's open only to them, and I think it could it could potentially cure some of the financial issues with this. I actually wonder if instead of buying into the ship, what they do is they build a ship that existing DVC members can get on board, right? That it becomes like a perk of being a DVC member in some way. That you have access to book on this ship, the general public does not, and it offers a unique experience to DVC members. That could be interesting, especially in a smaller kind of setting for me. And that kind of just going full scale into just something that's just super luxury, which I feel is like the selling point of DVC, right? Like, you don't have to stay at moderate resorts. You can stay at deluxe resorts now, right? Like, so, I would like to see them keep the existing look and feel, but maybe pivot more toward this like smaller ship experience, which also frankly opens up some interesting opportunities for them with regard to ports that they just can't get into.
So you wanted to kind of conform to the Disney standard and be pretty much the same kind of feel to it.
Yeah, because when I get on the cruise ship, I feel like the theming that they have going for them that is just really, really spectacular is this just kind of ocean liner, classic ocean liner feel that you don't get on Carnival, that you don't get on Royal, or Norwegian, right? Like, you are on board a classic sailing ship with distinctive colors. I think there are ways to theme within that. And I think if they pivot more to this kind of, higher end experience, that could be interesting. I just don't know if DVC membership is, you guys would know better than me. Are we talking about people that would enjoy a higher end experience, a VIP experience, or are we feeling more like DVC members are just, looking to get that deal? Because if we're looking to get that deal, then my idea would not work at all.
I don't know. Go ahead, Trevor.
I was going to say, I feel there's a Venn diagram there. It's definitely a mix.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Trevor.
So just my idea of theming, I'm going to go completely in left field. This is, Moana themed. Like, I don't know if it would be like the longboats
awesome.
Or the Kakamora big boat thing that they had going on. But, I mean, it kind of, I'm in the same mindset as Damon is, make it completely, that Disney theming, right? Make it just as stand out as possible. So, every time that boat shows up, everyone's like, oh, that's the DVC boat. There's no mistaking it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think you're right about that, about there are some members that bask in the luxury, right? They're there for the specialness, right? They're there to be treated extra special. And the only reason I know this is because I'm in some DVC groups, okay? And there are the people that expect, like, every time you walk through those gates that a cast member, gets down on one knee and kisses your shoes and then, welcome, sir and madam, like there are those people that expect that kind of treatment. And then there's others that are just looking for value and looking to save money. So, but to your point, if you're going on a Disney cruise, you're expecting that luxury, right? Already. You don't even need to put the DVC shine on it to make it, want to be luxury. It's already a very luxury experience, a very luxurious, I should say, instead of very luxury, experience. So you're really, how much more can you improve on that or build on that, right? How much more could you really make this a luxury experience with DVC? I think it's, to your point, making it more special, making it more exclusive, right? A lot of people like the exclusivity of DVC and that kind of thing. So I think kind of that's where you'd be at with that. So, okay, so here's my other question. So what kind of, again, let's pretend like this is happening. What kind of blue card privileges do you think DVC members should get on the ship? I'm just coming up with questions randomly here.
That's an interesting,
extra ones.
That's an interesting question. You know, one question I had was sort of, would we want concierge class rooms on this ship or not?
Well, what if all of them are concierge because it's DVC?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I wonder if the blue card privilege, like, it kind of goes back to my sort of, where my head keeps going is the blue card privilege just access to the ship itself? Right. I think, you know, to Damon's point, like, if you want to have an experience that's exclusive to DVC members and can't be sold to the general public, then the ship itself and the opportunity of the ship itself would be the blue card privilege. I guess you're sort of positing the question, though, what if, so would every DVC member have access, and then would the blue card members have special access?
I'm just saying in general, like, what extra benefits would you expect to get on this ship that you wouldn't get on a regular Disney ship? Let's go with that. Gotcha. I would look for, I think one thing I'd be interested in is more intimate shore excursion experiences, and perhaps, to Damon's point, longer stays in some of these ports. You know, on the theory that you're talking about a ship that people are coming back to consistently over, you know, potentially a 20-year period of sailing, right? Which means they're constantly on the ship, they're constantly sailing it, they're potentially constantly doing a similar itinerary over and over again. How can we get them shore excursion experiences that are unique, that just aren't the ones that we're offering to sort of the, you know, the other cruising population that, you know, you've seen this port enough. We want to give you something that's new and exciting about it. It's interesting. I just had a crazy thought, actually. So I'm just going to throw this out here, right? So what if instead of selling DVC rooms on board, so that when Lighthouse Point came on board, right, and there was rumors that not rumors, but that Joe Rohde was going to design Lighthouse Point, right? There was some news articles out that incorrectly stated that Disney was building like a resort on like Lighthouse. Is it Lighthouse Point? That's it, right? Lighthouse Point, Brian.
Yeah, it's Lighthouse Point. Yeah, okay. on Eleuthera, the island.
Yeah.
Eleuthera.
So Lighthouse Point. So there was some confusing news articles out there. So then all of a sudden, a bunch of people thought that they were building a resort on that island. Well, what if they did? What if they built a DVC resort on that island, right? And part of you buying into that DVC resort is some sort of access to the cruise ship that gets you there. Just crazy thought I just had.
Yeah, so it's like DVC ferry service.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not that the boat is just a ferry. Like, you'll still do some cruising around and stuff, but you'd stay on the island for maybe a couple days as part of it, right?
Yeah. What's interesting about that is that it attaches it to a hotel. I don't know. It feels like it would complicate the proposition for me, at least.
Oh, it totally would.
Because it's like, well, then I have to have points at the hotel, or what's the point chart for the hotel and the cruise line? Are they combining them? Right. So like, I would love, so let me say this separately. I would love for them to have a DVC resort on like Eleuthera or Castaway Cay. Like, I just think that would be amazing to be able to go do a land-based stay, especially Eleuthera, because there's actually a population there. And there's things to do there. There's some interesting sights to see, and the island is big enough that you can't really get to all of it in the short time that you're there. But it's a pretty relaxing island. I think that would be a really interesting thing. I'm not sure I would couple it with the cruise itinerary, because I'd like to have the opportunity to stay at the hotel, even if I'm sailing a regular Disney cruise, for instance, potentially.
So you're pro DVC rooms on an island, though?
Yes.
Although I don't know how you would get there. You'd have to figure out how to get there. That's the hard part, right? So
yeah, and they have Eleuthera is actually a populated, developed island, so they have an airport there.
Yeah, I was going to say, if the only way you could get there was by the cruise ship, that would be a very hard selling point, I think. That
would make it a little more difficult. That's why I was like saying, like, maybe it's a combo, right? Maybe like you buy this membership and it gets you a 4-day cruise, which but maybe the middles on this island for a couple days, and then, you know, ends on your way back and you head back. I don't know. It's a crazy idea I just had as we were talking.
Or you take the ship there, you stay, and then you fly back when you're done.
Or you could do that too. Yeah, that would work too. Yeah. But Trevor,
Yeah, except they wouldn't want the ship empty on the way back.
That's true. Yeah, they want
you never want a ship to be empty unless it's sitting out of the water.
That's very true. Trevor, you didn't get to answer the because I went on a tangent. You didn't get to answer the question about the extra benefits. Is there anything you can think of that you would think like extra benefits?
Honestly, I don't think I'm in a position where I could really speak to extra benefits because I've never been on a cruise, so I don't know. I don't know what standard to begin with.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I mean, and I haven't done a Disney cruise yet at this point. It's on my to-do list at some point, but my daughter's pretty young, and we're waiting for her to get a little bit older before we decide to drop that kind of money on a cruise. And plus, just we're hoping the grandparents will just pay for one, and we can just take her then. But we're not going to hold our breath for that.
Well, the other easy blue card benefits, frankly, if you're talking about opening the ship up to everyone, and then maybe there's something additional if you're a full-fledged blue card DVC member. I do think there's opportunity there for kind of replicating the Castaway Club in the DVC setting, which, is going to be very controversial with the members who hate the fact that there is this sort of, caste system in the membership. But, a platinum Castaway Club member on a DCL sailing, they get perks. They get, free meal at Palo once a sailing. They get priority access to booking over everybody else, right? So, they get access to the cabanas ahead of everyone except for concierge, right? So you could replicate on a DVC ship that kind of thing. I think it'd be pretty controversial with the membership, but it would help Disney drive sales of direct points.
Well, and then what if you just go the route of you don't have a blue card for this particular purchase, right? You have a separate card. Let's call it the anchor card. They put a big anchor on it. Make it nautical themed, right? So we'll make it the specific to the ship card, right? And then any non-members or anybody that's not a home resort member there, let's make it even more exclusive, right? So anybody that's traded their points in to stay there that's not a home resort member of the cruise ship, they get less benefits than the home members do. And the home members maybe have a specific lounge or a specific kind of in the idea of the DVC lounge, at Epcot, but even more separated, where you have just the people that own that as a home resort get to use this special area of the boat. Just a thought. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you could have a members lounge, right? Like they do at Epcot. Yeah. I mean, they have that on the boats today. They have the concierge lounge, so you could have sort of a larger version of that. Yeah.
There you go. All right. Anything else you guys can think of around this that you'd want to, like what other things you could do for this ship, other places that you could do for the ship? I feel like there's lots of tie-ins that you could do with Adventures by Disney too, with this kind of idea as well. Not that DVC and Adventures by Disney cross over that much, but it seems like you could do some interesting things with that as well. And it sounds like, didn't you say you were doing an Adventures by Disney, Brian? I think you said you were.
Yeah, we have an ABD river cruise next Christmas time for the Christmas markets down the Danube from Munich to Budapest. And ABD actually does have quite a few now embedded ABD experiences on Disney Cruise Line. Oh, so they kind of do their land-based tours that attach to cruises. So you can get like a couple days on either side of a cruise, especially in like Europe. To see a city before you hop on a cruise. But they've also started doing these embedded experiences within those cruises where you get special shore excursions and you're getting off the boat first and, that sort of stuff. So I think there is an opportunity for ABD tie-in. And they seem to be kind of pushing into this kind of luxury cruising experiences with the river cruises, because the ABD river cruises are actually with AMA Waterways over in Europe, but the boats that they're using for Disney were specially built for the Disney cruises. AMA operates them outside of some of the ABD river cruising that's done, but the boats were constructed, in partnership with Disney. So clearly they're, interested in this market. I'm watching it with interest because I suspect that this is going to go the way of the big red boat, meaning that sooner or later someone at Disney is going to say, why don't we own this end to end? Why don't we have our own river boats? And we had a guest on our show recently, actually, who had the same reaction. It was sort of like, pre-pandemic, I think we might have seen them headed that direction in the next couple of years. Post-pandemic, it'll probably be a little longer. So,
yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, that's interesting. It'll be interesting to see if they go that route and buy some river boats. So, Well, do either one of you guys have any more thoughts on this, or should we wrap this thing up? Or we have any more ideas or thoughts on how we could make this a cool idea? Not that it's not a cool idea, but an even cooler idea.
I hope someone at Disney is actually looking at this and that the reason they're not doing it is the numbers don't pencil in some way, or they haven't figured out how to make them pencil out. But like I said up front, I'm a big proponent of this idea because I love cruising. And if I could guarantee myself kind of a spot on a cruise ship once a year to force myself to take that vacation, I would love it. If I could save some money, all the better. I would want to make sure the experience isn't compromised, but I do love this idea. I hope someone has thought about it over at Disney and has just said either directionally is not where we want to head right now, or, it's just that the math doesn't really pencil out for them.
Here's a question though, before we wrap up. So, could they take a piece of an existing ship and just put, like they kind of do with the existing resorts now, where they sometimes will take over a piece of the resort and be like, okay, now this is DVC, kind of like they did with Copper Creek and Animal Kingdom. Could they do that with an existing ship and just say, hey, this group of staterooms is now DVC. We're going to sell DVC here, and then kind of eliminate some of that upfront cost because they already have all these cash members? Or would a DVC member not want that? Would a DVC member want the exclusive experience and not want, other non-DVC people on the boat? I know that just sounds so snooty, but you know what I mean?
I would say what I love about going on a cruise is the people. And the people that we get to meet are a lot of fun, and they're not all DVC members. Now, that said, they have the little DVC members opportunity on every sailing, mostly for them to do their sales pitch for whatever new resort is on sale, but it's a great way to meet people who are DVC. If you ask me, do I want to go on a sailing that's exclusively DVC? We have the DVC member cruise, right? And they do throw perks and fun things on that ship. And I have it on my list of things that I really, really want to try. I think we're going to have an episode coming up on our podcast in a couple of weeks, talking to some folks who've been on the member cruise. And so it's interesting. I'm not sure where I come out on, do I want to be on a ship that's exclusively DVC people, or do I want to be on a ship where I can interact with some folks who are DVC, but I can also just meet some general Disney fans who might be cruise line fans, like that sort of thing. So yeah, I don't know the answer to that question for myself just yet.
Yeah, no, I understand that. That makes sense. All right. Well, anything else, guys? Should we wrap this thing up? All right, cool.
I think we're good.
All right. Well, a big thank you again, Brian, for joining today. Can you give us a little plug for your podcast and where people can find you? If they want to listen to your show?
Sure. Yeah. We're the DCLDuo Podcast. We're on all the major podcast platforms that I can think of. You can follow us on Twitter at DCLDuo. We're also on Instagram. And we have a YouTube channel now that we've started up. We're doing a lot more sort of vlogging and video. So you can find us on YouTube at DCLDuo as well. We're actually working on a DCL 101, 201, 301, and 401 video series in partnership with the DCL Podcast, another DCL focused podcast out there. And so we've got that video series coming out over on YouTube. So if you're new to cruising and you're interested in trying to figure your way through how to pick a cruise and staterooms and all that sort of stuff, we're kind of slowly releasing some videos over there to help folks with that.
DCL Podcast is another friend of the show.
Yep. I think they're a friend of a lot of shows. We love Steve on the show.
Yeah, we do. Okay, great. So, and for us, thanks again, Brian, for coming on. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your expertise on this topic. I felt like this was a perfect topic for you to come on as a DVC member and a DCL person. So,
well, I appreciate you having us. It's been a lot of fun talking to you guys.
Same here. So, a reminder, as always, to our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to Welcome Home Podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, any other podcasts you can find out there. We are available. Just, download us, look for us as, Welcome Home and the DVC and, Disney One, not the other Welcome Homes that are out there. As always, reminder to our listeners, we're not employed by the Walt Disney Company, and as such, any and all opinions we express on the show are our own, so please consult a DVC representative or Disney cast member for more information about anything we talked about today. Again, big thanks to Brian for coming out today. We really appreciate you being on the show. This has been The Waitlist.
This is Skipper Albert Awol, the voice of the jungle, signing off from Welcome Home Podcast on the DVC.
Do a huddle when we hit its hair. How she can cuddle is no